Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Golf Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Garrison McDaniel, and we have a great show for you guys today where we'll be diving in to the Genesis Scottish Open tournament that just went on, well, for me, last night, but I got to wake up, watch some of the action this morning. It was some fun golf. The leaderboard looks pretty good for this Thursday. Looks like it's going to shape up for a good weekend of golf. We'll be talking about that. Our first two segments. And then our third segment, we're going to be discussing Scottie Scheffler withdraws from the Genesis Scottish Open. Why did he withdraw? With tournaments coming up, you would think that he wants to be in this one, but he had a better idea for how he wants to take this weekend. We'll be discussing all about that and just looking more into his season in the third segment. And in the fourth segment, we'll be talking about the rest of the world in golf this week. That includes Live Golf and the ISCO Championship, the parallel PGA Tour event this weekend. And then in our fifth and final segment of the night, we'll be discussing my picks and predictions for the Genesis Scottish Open. But before we get into all that, as always, guys, if you want to become a bigger part of the show than you guys already are, help support the GSMC Sports Network in more ways than you guys already do. Use the tips and donations link at the gsmcpodcast.net. It goes a long way helping out all the creators here at the GSMC Sports Network, and it is much appreciated. So with that being said, we're going to get right into this first segment, giving the course breakdown of the Genesis Scottish Open, as we've grown so accustomed to doing here on these Thursday podcasts. Genesis Scottish Open, this tournament plays pretty easy. It plays about 1.3 strokes under par average to the field, which means that these guys can just go out there and just put together a good round. This is kind of how last week played. I don't envision somebody going 28 under. That's just absolutely insane. Davis Thompson was playing some great golf and is still playing some great golf. We'll be getting to talk about him in the second segment. But for this tournament, it's not gonna be 28 under, but it's gonna be around 20 under for the posted lead, and we do have a good leaderboard to talk about. But of course, with the course breakdown, we're gonna of course be looking at Justin Thomas's round from today, see what kind of shots he took on the par 4 first hole. It is a 464-yard par 4. It is the 8th hardest hole on the golf course. Plays very even. It is a very, parable. Not a lot of bogeys, only 19 bogeys and 3 double pluses here today. Double pluses from Olesen, Arnaus, and Luke List in this first round. But other than that, it played pretty easy. Just hit the fairway and you got a good shot at birdie. The only guys that found really trouble, found real bogeys, were the guys that ended in the rough. There's only a handful of guys that found bogey from the fairway, only like 6 or 7 of them on this first hole from the day. So it plays a little bit easier. It's kind of just a straightaway tee box over here. Green is pretty straightforward. Just hit the fairway. It's a narrow fairway, so it's harder to hit. And as it is a pattern on this entire golf course, the fairways are just so up and down. Like, they're so hilly. We're used to seeing a lot more straightaway fairways that don't have a lot of terrain on them, but these fairways look pretty difficult to play off of, so they're not guaranteed birdies from the fairways. That's why we see a lot of pars. It was possible to say par from the rough as well. These guys, for the most part, took it about 260, and Justin Thomas actually bombed away on the first tee here on the par for first. He hit 340 with his driver to give him a 120 into the pin. He got a birdie on that, opened his round pretty well. So that is the par 4 first hole. Second hole is another par 4. It is about 500 yards. This one today played 493. Guys deciding to really play about 300, about a 3-wood or a short driver here. Huge clump of pars. This hole played very difficult. Not a lot of birdies, but the birdies that were made, 8 birdies made, 6 of them came out of the fairway. So hit the fairway, you'll give yourself a good opportunity at getting a green in regulation. But this hole, 4th hardest hole on the golf course, plays .130 above par. It is a difficult one of the more difficult ones on the entire front 9. That does play a little bit easier. Next hole is the par 5, 600-yard third. It plays about half of a stroke under par. So many birdies. There were more birdies than there were pars on this hole today, and there were 4 eagles as well. The eagles were really from the long tees, from the long drives. The guys that were able to drive it about, Rory McIlroy got an eagle on this hole. Looking at his scorecard, he drove it about 330 yards. So drive it far, be very confident, be very aggressive, and it is very easy to be able to get a good score on that hole. Birdie's a must on that hole, basically. It is 600 yards, so difficult for me to say, but birdie is definitely a must for these guys on that one. Next up, 422 par 4 fourth hole. It does play under par. 12th, the par 5 third hole is the easiest hole on the golf course, by the way. The par 4 fourth hole is the 12th hardest hole on the golf course, so the 8th, or not the 8th, no, the 7th easiest hole on the golf course. This hole is a dogleg right from the tee box. If you get your drive down like 310, 320, it puts you in a really good spot to then take that right hand turn onto the green. Plays a little bit easier, only 18 bogeys and 37 birdies. 24% of the field birdied this hole, 63% of the field parred this hole. So that comes out to about 88% of the field had a par or better on this hole. Makes it pretty easy. So that is why it plays almost a tenth of, or more than a tenth of a stroke under par. The next hole also plays over a tenth of a stroke under par. It plays minus 180. It is a drivable par 4. It is 338 yards. There were a couple guys that did drive the par 4 fifth. It's really weird because 2 guys drove the par 4 fifth here. Both of those guys ended with a par. If you're driving a green on a par 4, you got to at least end with a birdie. I mean, you have to end with a birdie. Both guys that were able to drive it, which were Hill and Alexander Bjork, were the ones that were able to drive it. Just somehow unable to come up with a score there. That is very shocking, but that's golf, isn't it? Both of those guys didn't have too great of a day, and maybe around the greens is why, but this hole does play pretty easy. 101 pars, 40 birdies. The green is very volatile, very difficult, but if you land on the top shelf of this green where the pin was today, it makes it a little bit easier. And in the back part, the green funnels to the back part, there will be a day that the pin will be over there, and that day is when a lot of people will score. This might be the easiest hole on the golf course on that day. Next up, the par 3 6th, a simple par 3 that found the field really struggling to hit the green in regulation. A lot of guys played very aggressive on this one. Nobody really electing to go in the middle of the green. A lot of guys just attacking the pin, and when it worked out for them, when they hit the green attacking the pin, it almost always resulted in a birdie. However, a lot of guys missed the green short or hit into the bunkers. That resulted in bogeys and double bogeys, as these bunkers are very hard to get out of. So aggressive works until it doesn't. I mean, it's all, that's what golf is. Next up, the third hardest hole on the golf course is a par 4, 505 yard. Really got a bomb away on this tee shot, and that's what a lot of guys did. But still coming up with a lot of bogeys here. It's guys like Xander Schauffele, Ricky Fowler, Luke List coming up. Jordan Spieth came up with a bogey on this hole. It does play very difficult, especially if you miss the fairway. A lot of guys did miss the fairway on their first shot. And then the second shots made it, all over the screen and all over the fairway for the second shot. When you miss the green on the second shot, it almost always resulted in a bogey here for these guys today. Next up, after that par 4 7th, is the par 4 8th. A lot of par 4s on this front 9. There are 6 of them on the front 9, and there are 6 of them on the front 9, 4 of them on the back 9. So a lot of par threes on the back nine. So get through these par fours. A lot of them play pretty difficult, except for the 338-yard one. But this one, number 10, one of the dead middle holes on this golf course. There's a little bit of water off the tee box to the right. Should be completely out of play for these guys. They are PGA pros. But for their first shot, basically hit it into the fairway, results in birdies. Almost all the birdies came from the fairway on this hole. When you missed the fairway, when it was all around the place, that's when you ended up with a lot of pars. There's also bunkers on the right-hand side and in the fairway that makes it a little bit more difficult for these guys on this 8th hole. Justin Thomas was able to birdie this hole after putting a drive 277 yards with the 3-wood and then hitting 160 into the green, just hitting the pin almost perfectly. That capped off a run of 4 straight birdies that we'll be surely talking about. Next up, the par 3 9th is another difficult hole. It is the 5th most difficult hole on this golf course. Miss the green, you're in for a rough day. Hit the green, you can definitely birdie. There were more bogeys than birdies on this hole today. That was in result of a lot of guys missing the green. A lot of pars from the green. The guys that were able to put it right onto the flagstick were the ones that were able to birdie this, like Billy Horschel, Mackenzie Hughes, Sungjae Im was able to get a birdie, Corey Connors, because they were aggressive and put it right on the flagstick. When you ended up towards the top of the screen, like Emiliano Grillo or Nick Taylor or Doug Gim, you ended up with a par. Next up, the par 5 10th, the 16th hardest hole on the golf course, so 30 is the easiest hole. It had 2 eagles or better, 67 birdies and 76 pars, almost more birdies than pars. That is an easy hole. It played about 4 strokes. It played about 4/10 of a stroke under par, with a lot of guys being able to get birdies, like Aaron Rai, Colin Morikawa, Brian Harman, Ricky Fowler. A lot of drives ended up in the same exact area. It's when they missed the fairway was when they had troubles with bogeys. Next up, the par 4 11th, 475 yards. Same thing here. Drive, very consistent. These guys, just the spray chart for these drives, just landing in the fairway. And then the ones that ended outside the fairway were the ones with the bogeys. This is another kind of dogleg right as well. Plays very similar to the one that we talked about earlier. Hit it about 310, 320 yards, and then you'll have a good shot into the flag. Next up is the par 3 12th, 204 yards, hit the green. It's par 3s, you just need to hit the green. The bogeys came from off the green, almost all of them, besides 1 bogey from on the green. Or, sorry, 2 bogeys from on the green. But that's just some bad putting. You got to hit your putts as well. These flag sticks were close right for the most part, so played pretty difficult, honestly, for these flag sticks. Next up, par 4 13th. Plays under par, tied for the 8th easiest hole or 8th hardest hole on the golf course. A lot of birdies. Basically, this weekend comes to around the green play. Really, it kind of plays very similar to how we saw Pinehurst number 2 play. A lot of difficult holes and a lot of difficult situations that you'll find yourself in, but if you're able to rise up to the occasion, you can absolutely go out and win a day like Rory McIlroy was able to do on Saturday or something like that with the U.S. Open. Next up is another par 3, 161-yard par 3. What am I going to say? Hit the green. This one ended up with a lot more birdies. There were 48 birdies from this hole and only 7 bogeys. There were a few bogeys from on the green and 5 from off the green here. Next up, 488-yard par 4 15th. Plays pretty difficult. It is the most difficult hole on the golf course. Just such a narrow fairway, and it's one of those fairways that you just need to figure out what you really want to do. If you miss the narrow part that is at around 300 yards, it's either you hit it into a narrow part of a fairway at 300 yards or you go for 320, 330, and there's fairway bunkers on the right side with a little bit more speed. Can get a lot of these guys in trouble. So this was one of the more difficult holes One of the more difficult decisions these guys face. Next up, par 5 16th. This is the second easiest hole on the golf course. 576 yard par 5. Hit it into the fairway. You'll be good. Justin Thomas was unable to hit it into the fairway. Had to go for an alternate round that took him into the rough with his second shot on the layup shot and able to 2-putt it for par. Next up, par 3 17th. 203 yards. This is the 7th hardest hole on the golf course. Hit the green and you'll be in a good spot. That's just what par 3s are. Par 4 18th, the second hardest hole on the golf course, 483 yards. You can definitely attack the green, but this is a good up and down opportunity like Justin Thomas did. So that's how the golf course plays. Pretty straightforward, but with a lot of difficult fairways. So we'll talk about more what that means for these guys in this field come segment 5. But when I come back for my first break of the night, after I did conclude talking about the course breakdown, we'll be talking about the leaderboard breakdown from Thursday's action.